Good morning. This thing was not made for people with a lot of hair. Okay, we'll see. Brian told me that if I wore this while I played, I'd probably dance it off, so excuse me just a moment. Okay. All right, I am so glad everyone is here today. And if you're coming to hear a sermon with 3 points with the letters that start with the same thing, you're going to be really disappointed. Okay? So, kids, you can be dismissed to Kid Zone. Good job, you're here. So we're going to do Kid Zone here today in the worship center so that you guys can see kind of what our kids do when they run off upstairs. So it's going to be Kid Zone in here. And we're going to start off with something a little unconventional, so I hope you enjoy it. Oh, you have to turn it on. Hold on. Okay, now I got it. Wow, I didn't think we were in Kid Zone anymore. Yeah, this is like Kid Zone supersize. Yeah, Miss Chrissy said that today we're going to be out of this world. Maybe this is what she meant. Oh wait, no. She said today's lesson would be not of this world. Where is she anyways? She's a little shy, so maybe we're teaching the lesson on not of this world. Speaking of not of this world, this is an alien. Oh, you get it. You're playing along with the not of this world idea. Cool. No, I mean, there's a real alien in Kid Zone. That's silly. There's no such thing as silly green aliens with fur eyes and furry legs. And monster feet. What are you squealing about? Alien! Are you here to suck out our brains and mind control me to eat cats?
Eat cats? Ew, gross.
Aliens speak English?
Alien where?
Right there. You. You're the alien.
Me? I'm not an alien, I'm just Katie.
Katie? What in the world are you doing in that alien costume?
Exactly. I'm not of this world ready. Miss Chrissy said that I needed to be prepared to be not of this world for Kid Zone, so here I am.
Oh my, I think you've been watching too many Area 51 specials.
Well, what on earth could she have meant by being not of this world then?
Well, I know a Bible verse that talks about that.
The Bible talks about aliens?
No. The Bible tells us in John 17:16, they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world.
I'm confused. So John was an alien.
Oh, humans. No, Jesus was praying about the believers.
So Jesus and the disciples were aliens.
No, you really must be from Pluto.
Pluto is no longer a planet.
Focus, alien, focus. Jesus is the Son of God, sent to this earth to save sinners and live a life of love, compassion, and forgiveness. When we follow Jesus, we're supposed to live like him. That means we don't act like or think like the rest of the world. We live in the world, but we don't act like we're of the world.
So I'm supposed to be a Christian alien, acting like Jesus instead of acting like the world.
Finally, the alien has landed.
I'm relieved.
Relieved? Why?
Because being an alien is hot and itchy.
Ugh, humans. All right. I know we're goofy in Kid Zone, but it's a lot of fun. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about being not of this world. And even though some of the kids like our alien stuff, that's not quite what the Bible meant. So I'll start off with the serious stuff. There are 3 parts of this world. The first part, obviously, is our physical earth, because if we didn't have it, then we would not be here. So we have the physical earth, and then the part that the Bible refers to all the time when he said, for God so loved the world, he didn't mean he loved the planet and the dirt. He meant he loved his people. So we have the people that is loved by God and that Jesus died for. And then we also have the kind of Area 51 part that it makes me think of, the cosmos, and that's just Satan's rule of the world system. And that, as you notice if you watch TV ever, it's run by greed, selfishness, and pride. So this is what we're talking about when we say not of this world. This is the kind of world that Christians try to separate themselves from. So if you want to look at someone who's living in the world, then there's some things that you might notice about them. If you have a person that's living in the world and they're living of the world, they have a couple goals that might be different than the goals of Jesus. The first goal is everything they do is to please themselves. Number one goal all day, every day, is to please themselves. The second thing that a person living of this world is they want everything they can see. I want a bigger car. I want a nicer house. I want a better job. I want more money. I want the best shoes. It's constant, and when they get it, they just want the next best thing. It kind of reminds me of the people lining up at the tents at the iPhone place, when the next one comes out. I will never understand that. So the second thing that you'll notice about someone who's living of the world is that they always want more. There is no satisfaction and there's no fulfillment. And the third one, I thought this one was interesting. John describes it as a prideful alazon, and it comes from an old Greek word called alazonia, and this word has been around since way back in Aristotle times, those books that I don't remember reading in high school. But they used to call an alazon a person who would always praise himself, even to complete strangers. So this has been around since 320 years before Jesus ever came. They describe someone that's living of this world is always being prideful and boasting of what they have done, what they have, and they'll even try to get the attention from a complete stranger. So obviously, living of the world is not what Jesus had in mind for us. So we're going to be looking at today on how we live a godly life. And it's difficult. It's not easy at all. When you want to live a godly life, the first thing you have to do is follow his commands. And even though they're really clear, they're very black and white in the Bible. The world likes to turn them into gray. They think they're open for interpretation, but it's very, very clear. If we want to live a godly life, we must follow his commands. 1 John 4:4 says, "He who is in you is greater than he who is in the world." That's why I picked the song earlier, because it tells us that he, and that's capital H, he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. So even though living out God's commands is very, very difficult, if you have God living in you, you can be greater than the temptations of the world. So he promises that. And I believe that anything that's promised in the Bible is good as gold. So that's a promise he has for you. So the first thing you want to do if you want to live godly is to follow his commands and keep them. The second thing you want to do is living in God's will. Quite honestly, I think living in God's will is more difficult than following the commands. Because a lot of the kids will tell me in Kids Zone, "I've never murdered anyone." I am so glad. I am so glad. So following God's commands sometimes are a little bit easier. But when you talk about being completely in God's will, that's when it gets a little bit tricky. So what we're going to look at today is the realistic fact that you cannot be on both sides. It kind of reminds me of football. Unless you play for UT, you cannot play for both teams. So you got to pick a side. You can't play for both teams. And that's not just an analogy, it's very biblical. In Matthew 6:24, it says, "No one can serve two masters. Either will you hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other." So there's no in between. You can't switch back and forth. It's one or the other. And it kind of reminds me of a fence analogy, and leave it to the children's director to take Pastor Rick over here, who preached 2 weeks ago and told you, do not build a fence, do not take offense to things, tear the fence down. Well, today I'm telling you to build a fence and a really high one. Okay? Sorry, Rick. But this is a different kind of fence. So if you look at a fence, the Bible calls Christians to live righteously in God's divine plan rather than living like the world and breaking any law or command they see fit to justify their behavior. Okay? So the world will take a law and they'll tweak it and say, well, if this is how you feel, then you can break this command. That's what living on the wrong side of the fence looks like, because you are breaking God's laws because you want to do something, so you'll justify it. I can do this because. And I might step on some toes here, but a lot of times people say, I'm a Christian, I'm saved, I'm good to go, I'm on this side of the fence. But unfortunately, the other side of the fence is not only unbelievers, but it's Christians who are not following God's commands and Christians who are not living in His will. So, I have this little doggy named Oscar. Some of you have met Oscar. He was a stray. I'm not surprised that he was a stray because he's Houdini. He can get out of anything. So we have a nice fenced-in backyard, and I go call Oscar, and he doesn't come. And his legs are only 3 inches long, so it takes him a minute. But if he's not back to the door in a few minutes, I have to go look for Oscar. And there's numerous times that Oscar has squeezed himself under the fence. So I was calling Oscar, and I heard the little jingle of his collar. He was sitting in the neighbor behind us on their deck, sitting on their lounge chair by the pool. I'm like, I know this looks like a better life, grass is greener on the other side, but they don't feed you. So I found the spot that he dug himself under, and it was tiny. I don't know how he fit. So I call him, and he comes back over to me, and he sticks his little nose through, and I'm like, come on, buddy, come on, you can do it. And I don't know why, but he could go to their side of the fence, but he couldn't get back under. He stuck his head through, and I was pulling, and I'm like, come on, buddy, help me out. And I could not get him through. I was like, okay, well, I don't want to pull his head off because the girls would be really angry with me, so I'm going to have to climb the fence. I don't know the technical name, the people who do fences, I apologize, but we have the ugly side of the fence, the ones with the boards. So I'm like, okay, I'll just climb the fence, no big deal. So I climbed the fence and swung myself over. I'm like, all right, I got this. So I pick Oscar up, and now I'm on the pretty side of the fence. So I'm in my neighbor's backyard with a dog, and it's fenced in and you can't get out. And I'm like, okay. Now I got to climb a fence with no boards with one arm. Oh, by the way, I'm 6 months pregnant. So I start yelling for Logan, and Logan comes running out, and I have to gently toss Oscar over, and then ever so gracefully do a pull-up and, stick my leg up, and then try to teeter-totter over the fence. And I made it, and Gracie's okay. She made it through too. But what I want to tell you is that when you cross the fence, it looks nice. Their pool's really not nice. Oscar was enjoying himself. But the trouble is getting yourself back over. Because it's so easy to cross the fence. It's so easy. Sometimes you don't even know it. But you just stick your nose under, you look, or over. He's small, so he goes under. But you cross the fence, but then you see yourself on the other side, and you realize, well, I can't jump the fence. My legs are 3 inches. I can't fit back under. So once you get over, it's very, very hard to get back out. And James 4:4 says, don't you know that to be a friend of the world is to hate God? So anyone who chooses to be the world's friend becomes God's enemy. Now, it doesn't mean love the earth. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you're living on the other side of the fence, you're living of the world, then you can't be on two teams. You can't be living of the world and still be in God's will. You can't be living on that other side of the fence and still be serving the Lord. It's not possible. In Deuteronomy, it says that, and Deuteronomy 30:19, it said, I'm offering you the choice of life or death. You can choose either blessings or curses. You can choose. And it says, I want you to choose life, and then your children will live. So it tells us you got a fence, godly living, ungodly living, and you can choose. Because if you choose godly living, there's going to be blessings. There's also going to be hardships. Nobody said living the life that Jesus called us to is easy or perfect. Ask Paul. Our first song we did was our favorite Vacation Bible School theme. That's why all the kids were dancing. But we studied the life of Paul. Paul's life was not easy. He was imprisoned. He was stoned 3 times. He died a couple times, and God brought him back to life. He was shipwrecked 3 times. But he followed God's will. So it doesn't mean, this verse doesn't say blessings and rainbows and unicorns. It just says you can choose whether or not you're going to have blessings or curses. But I want you to choose life. So there's a lot of information in 1 John and James when they're warning us about being worldly. And it makes me think of strawberries. And I know, Victoria, this will make your skin crawl. Victoria's allergic to strawberries. But have you ever gone and looked for a good batch of fruit? And I don't know about you guys, but I always flip it over because the good ones are on top and the bad ones are always on the bottom. If you have a good batch of fruit, but one strawberry, one grape, whatever you're buying, if just one is moldy, it spreads. So if you take the moldy one out and wash them off, your strawberries will last a minute. But if you leave the moldy one in, it spreads like wildfire. And so to me, the dangers of crossing over to the dark side is kind of like getting yourself in some moldy fruit. Because Satan wants to trap you. He's not laying around twiddling his thumbs, he's busy. I've already said a couple times this morning, get behind me, Satan, because whenever you're doing something that's important to you and you've prayed over it, God is with you, but Satan is going to work overtime to mess it up. Everything on the media doesn't work. Nothing would pull up. The internet that makes our live stream possible, gone. We stick I call it a magic stick, whatever you tech guys call it, the little jump drive thingy. Stick it in, and he's like, nothing. And I said, get thee behind me, Satan, because he's busy. He's always trying to mess up your plans to follow his will. He's very, very busy. And when Satan is trying to pull you in, it's not a let's jump the fence and take off moment. It's usually you peek over the other side, you stick your head over, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a riptide. I don't usually go to the ocean because there's things there that eat me, but my children love the ocean. But at the ocean, you can wade out, and it's fine. I can go a little deeper. It's fine. I can go a little deeper, but you'll get to a point where all of a sudden, even really, really good swimmers get caught in that riptide and they're gone. You can't fight it. And then you find yourself way, way down the beach. So in Ephesians 6:12, it says, our fight is not against human beings. It's against the rulers, the authorities, the powers of the dark world. It's against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly world. So yeah, we gotta get the kids to school. We gotta get to work. We have projects to do. We have stuff to fix. We have cars that break down. But our real fight in this world is against Satan. That's our real fight. And it's very, very difficult because some people will say, well, if that's the case, then I can just completely avoid the whole fence. Just stay over here. I'll go to church and I'll go to Kroger, and that's it. But that's not, well, I don't know, that's the dark world sometimes. But that's not what Jesus called us to do, because what he called us to do is to live in the world, but not of the world. So of course we have to live on the planet, but it's saying we've got people all around us. Some are great people. Some people need a little work. But the problem is, if we only isolate ourselves and stay on our side of the fence with Christians, we're not making an impact. We're doing good, but we're not helping anybody else. So If I want to see an example of people who lived in the world but not of the world, I'm going to go to the source. I'm going to look at Jesus. Because Jesus immersed himself to make a redemptive difference, but he didn't participate in their behaviors. So he was all in the world, every day, every account. He's with the sinners, he's with the people, but he never engaged in their behaviors. So for people to say, it's temptation, I can't help it. Yes, you can, with the help of God. Because Jesus was always with the tax collectors. He was with the sinners. He was with the woman at the well. He was with the lepers. He was with those that are outcasted. And he immersed himself in their life. Not because he wanted to be like them or because it was fun, because he decided that the only way to make a lasting impact is to have a relationship with people. The relationship is the key. So, my dear lovely assistant is going to come back up here. We did an experiment last week and it didn't go very well. So you'll see why in a minute. What I'm going to show you is kind of how we as Christians can be in the world but not of the world. I'm sorry about your hair. That was bad. Okay, this is my lovely assistant, Katie. And she's going to kind of give us a demonstration of how we as Christians can be in the world but not of the world. So we're going to pretend that this bottle right here is the actual planet. And then this lovely water down here is all God's people. It can be believers, non-believers. We're down here. And the world tells us that we should intermingle. We should never say something's wrong. If you speak out against something that's wrong, then you're a hater. You're racist. It's a hate crime. But that's not what God calls us to do. So we're going to separate ourselves. We're going to stay on our side of the fence. We're going to separate ourselves, just like Samson was supposed to keep himself separate. He was supposed to follow the rules of the Hebrews, not engage in the things that everyone else did. We're supposed to keep ourselves separate and different because we are Christians. So Katie's going to add the Christians in. I let her do this because I'm really bad at pouring and I'd probably spill it everywhere. So here we are. We are Christians in this world. And I like us because we're really bubbly for this. We're supposed to be happy. But if you notice, if you've done this before, if you guys cook or if you've done cool science experiments, you will notice something unique happens. What happens to our non-believers versus our godly Christians? You can answer. This is Kid Zone. It's separate. Thank you. But here's what happens. Temptations come along. So we're going to have our temptations here. Here you go. We're going to have our temptations here that come along, and they're very, very difficult to say no to, some more than others. But we're going to put our temptations in here, and I'd like for you to see what happens if you are following God's commands, you are asking for His help, you love Him, you follow Him, and you are trying to do His will. Thank you, lab assistant. You guys on the front row, can you see what's happening to our temptations? They're floating down here through the top layer of Christians and going straight to the bottom. See that? Isn't that so cool? Now Katie's going to very carefully put the top on. It looks like she's bleeding, but she's not. That's a different experiment. So we're going to try not to mess with the carpet, but she's going to swirl it a bit for me. And this is what happens to sin and temptation when it's presented to us. Because I don't know about you, some people say, it's not that hard to follow God's will. Yes, it is. Middle school, 11-year-olds, pro-abortion. Very vocal. You can kill babies because it's our right. Bend the rules. Thou shalt not murder. Nope, that doesn't apply if it's a baby. You have 11-year-olds asking another 11-year-old out, girl asking a girl out. 11. Why? Because you can feel how you want to feel. You can like who you want to like. So when we have these temptations, okay, there we go. When we have these temptations, sometimes it gets a little gray, especially for our kids. Because everybody else, all of the non-believers, they say it's okay. It's okay. Follow what you want. Do what you want. Get self-satisfaction. If that's how you feel, do it. It can be right. But the problem is sometimes us Christians get pulled up in that riptide. We get caught under the fence and it pulls us over because the rest of the world is telling us that things are okay when they're not. But no matter what, we're called to be separate. We're called to be different. We're called to stay on our side of the fence. And this takes a minute, but you're going to see what happens when we do that. Thank you, Lab Assistant Katie. So, for me, the biggest part of staying on our side of the fence is something that's very, very difficult. And it's called a full surrender. If you want to really stay on your side of the fence but be like Jesus and make a difference, you have to fully surrender yourself to God and His will. Because here's the bottom line. We don't belong to ourselves. We don't even belong to the world if you're a Christian. We belong to Jesus. So if you belong to Jesus, He's calling you to fully surrender your life. And in Romans 12:2 it says, don't live the way the world lives. Live the way of thinking, be completely changed. Then you'll be able to test what God wants for you. And you will agree that what God wants is right. It doesn't say that you'll kick and scream and complain about it and say, why are you doing this to me? Although we do that sometimes. It says that you will agree that what God wants is right because His plan is good and pleasing and perfect. It did not say that His plan was easy. It said His plan for you is good, pleasing, and perfect. And I'll tell you this, I'm not preaching at anybody because most of the time when I do a lesson, it's because it's from my past experiences. So when I tell you to live in full surrender, it's not I believe in Jesus. Full surrender, yay, good to go, set for life. To me, it doesn't happen that way. It takes a minute. Because when I was a toddler, I knew of God. When I was a small child, I began to know God. I was baptized when I was about 7. Then as a teenager, I began to love God. Then when I was about 17 or so, I began to serve God. But it wasn't until about 8 years ago that I gave a full surrender. That doesn't mean I didn't love Jesus. It doesn't mean I wasn't a Christian. It just means that I had one toe on the other side of the fence and hanging on, and I had plans. I had things and goals I wanted to accomplish in life. They were mine, my goals. I was supposed to have a pediatric clinic by now. There's a lot of things that I had planned in my life, and they were not going as planned. And when the temptations of this world started to suck me in, instead of being in full surrender and following Jesus and wanting to go His path, I was trying to dig under the fence. I was looking at the world. I was looking at people to rescue me. I was looking at my situation, and I forgot who's in control. I forgot that I don't belong to myself. I'm a child of God. This life is not my own. And what I forgot to do was to let the temptations and the sins of this world stay on that side of the fence and keep myself separate. So when I hit rock bottom about 8 years ago, that's when I realized I had to fully surrender because there's nothing in this life that I control. Nothing. The only thing I control is my choice. I can choose blessings or curses. My choice. So at that point, I decided I better stay on my side of the fence. And not only do I want to follow God's plan, but I want to be a full surrender. Every part of my life, full surrender. My family, my job, my marriage, everything. My ministry here, full surrender. Because a lot of people think that once you say the prayer and accept Jesus into your heart, that that's your get out of jail free ticket. I'm forgiven, so I can do whatever I want because God's going to forgive me, and oh well, what difference does it make? But that's not how Jesus calls us to live. Because a lot of people in this world think that your purpose here is to please yourself. And what they don't realize is that all the possessions and the accomplishments and the things you boast about and your promotion and your new car, and I feel bad because we just traded our car in, so I'm feeling a little guilty, but the car, people think that the possessions that you have and the accomplishments you make is what makes you happy. Have you seen Hollywood lately? I loved Robin Williams. I thought he was a genius. Such a genius. Famous on the whole world, famous comedian, famous actor. He could do anything. Suicide. And I'm sure he was wealthy. I didn't ask him, but I'm sure he was wealthy. I think the guy that played the Joker, is that Heath Ledger? Famous. Just made the biggest movie that he had ever made. Suicide. Numerous musicians. Famous everywhere, world touring, suicide. So to me, that's a very obvious picture of accomplishments and possessions don't give you joy. Being in God's will gives you joy. One of the happiest times of my life is when I was broke, by myself, had no money in the bank, and if I had 12 cents left over, awesome. But I was in God's will, and it's gotten better ever since. But Psalms 16:11 says, "You always show me the path of life. You will fill me with joy when I am with you. You will make me happy forever at your right hand." So it says, you will fill me with joy when I am with you. If you're not on your side of the fence, you're not with him. If you venture over to the worldly side of the fence, then you're missing God's protection, his provision, and his blessings. So if we look at it that way, and we know that the devil is a thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but God comes to give life, and I want them to have it in the fullest possible way. It says, come on the wrong side of the fence, join the non-believers or the Christians who aren't living in God's will and fulfilling his commands, and you're with the devil. Steal, kill, and destroy. But God wants you to have life. So I have voluntold a couple people. Thank you, Rick. Let's give Rick a round of applause. Rick's going to help me out here with my shape sorter. Now, here's the rule. You can't take the top off and cheat, okay? Okay. All right. So, when we are trying to live our life and make our own plans, our own goals, we want to do what we want to do. We want to do it the way we want to do. We're trying to live a life with our goals, but still get God's blessings. Go ahead there, Rick. I told him I was going to pick on him. That's not working? It won't fit. Okay, we'll try this goal. I told him I had to pick a good sport.
Okay.
Nothing? Okay. We'll try this goal. Maybe this one will work because you really worked hard at it.
So I can't open the lid?
Cannot open the lid. So here's what happens. When we have our own goals, when we want to live the way we want to, don't go away yet. We want to live the way we want to live, and we want to stay on the wrong side of the fence. Sure, we might have some good plans, and sometimes they actually work out. There's some very evil rich people. There's some very evil famous people. But the problem is we are not living within God's will. But here's what happens when you live in God's will. He says, Rick, I want you to minister to the youth. No, God, I don't want to. I have other plans in my life. But when God calls you to do something, he paves the way. He makes it work. He says, Rick, I know you had another job, but I want you to open your own company. Oh gosh, that's scary. I need to feed my family. He says, no, I want you to do it my way. Good job. He paves the way. And he says, hey, I found you a beautiful wife. Guess what? You get 3 kids. Wait, I'm not a dad. Well, you are now. I want you to do it my way. So sometimes in life, when we're trying to do it our own way and we have our own plans, it just doesn't work. And it's so frustrating. Were you frustrated?
Yeah.
You should see little kids when I give them the wrong pieces. They get really mad at me. It's so frustrating when you're trying to make your own plans work and it's not working. Why? It's not God's will. If it's God's will, it will work out. It might not work out today. It might not work out tomorrow. It might be 10 years. But God's will, if it's what he wants for you, it will work out. And then after it does, you're like, whoa, how did that happen? That just snuck right up on me. Round of applause for my lovely friend. Thank you. I didn't want to pick someone who get angry and throw my pieces. So here's what I want you to think about. You can do whatever you want to do. It's your choice, the Bible tells us. Choose your blessings or your curses. It's your choice. But if you stray from God's will, you're going to miss your blessings. And you might not ever even know what they were. You might think, well, I got my new job, I got this, but you don't even know what God had planned for you. You miss it. It's kind of like GPS, and they tell you when you get off course, turn right at the next light. Recalculating. And that's what God's doing. When we're going this way and he wants us to go the other way, he's thinking, "What you're missing everything. You're missing it." And I know I don't get out much. So my quote today is from How to Train Your Dragon, because that's all that I get to watch. So if any of you have ever seen the movie How to Train Your Dragon, there's Hiccup, which is the Viking chief, and his dragon Toothless, which is a night fury, and he can fly 70 miles an hour. I know my stuff. So Hiccup and Toothless were always fighting against all the evil things in the world. And Hiccup said, I was too busy fighting for what I wanted that I did not think about what you needed. So if you're always fighting for your plan, your will, what I want, the next thing I want, that's great, but you're forgetting about what you need. You're forgetting about what God needs from you. So we're going to do a little experiment here. I'm going to have Mr. Jeff and Grayson come up and move my puppet stand for a moment. And I've already voluntold Grayson and Katie to do this little project for me. I thought about having the whole audience do it just for fun, but some of you would get me for it. We're going to do a little experiment. You can just go away somewhere, just out of the way of my lovely obstacle course. Oh, the puppets are going to be upset. Her pants are down. Okay. It's a recurring problem with puppets. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Grayson. Grayson, would you like to choose the easy road or the hard road? Easy. Okay. So Grayson's going to start out with this orange cone down here. And then Katie, there you are. I didn't recognize you in your normal clothes.
Orange. That means we're going to lose my favorite.
So here's what we're going to do. We are going to pick 2 roads. This is no reflection of Grayson, his character or anything. That's my, disclaimer. I just picked Grayson because I knew he could play the part. So we got Grayson on this side who's living of the world. Sorry, Grayson. And then we've got Katie over here who's living not of this world. All right, so Grayson, I would like you to go through our first obstacle, which is that cone. Pick it up. There's a little piece of paper inside. You can read loud. Can you read it for me?
I cheated on my manager's test at work, so I got promoted to shift manager instead of the guy who had been studying for 3 months. I got a raise and the weekends off. Boom!
Good job, Grayson. Reward for being ungodly, and it happens a lot. So he got the promotion, but what Grayson didn't realize is because he didn't actually know the material, he broke company protocol 3 times in the next month and he got fired. Sorry. All right, Katie, your first job is you got to hop over those lily pads there. Very good. And I think your cone already fell over, but I think that one should be it. Can you read really loud? Sorry, that's mean. So, Katie studied really hard. That's actually is of character for Katie. She studies really hard. But Katie really wanted this promotion. She needed the money. She needed the hours. She did not get it. But what Katie didn't know is God did not give her that job because the job she'd always wanted, being a teacher, she was offered a couple months later. God didn't want her to have the manager's position. God wanted her to be where He called her to be. And that's where she went. Okay, next one, Grayson. I know this is difficult.
I'm young and can choose to do what I want. With weekends off, I go out every Friday night and get drunk. In fact, I just met a new girlfriend at the bar.
Go, Grayson. Go, Grayson. Well, here's what happened. Good job, Grayson. You got a girlfriend. Awesome. And a year later, they were both driving home from the bar, and Grayson was drunk and hit a tree, and his girlfriend died. Sorry, Grayson. Katie, go ahead. Very nice. All right, so I got this a lot in college. You don't drink? No, I don't. I was the only one in the entire University of Memphis campus besides my sister. So Katie decided not to go out with her friends, and they pretty much ditched her. So what happened is after 3 years, Katie's still single. Sorry, Katie. But she met a lot of good friends, and she became very strong in her faith. Go ahead, Grayson. That's later.
After my girlfriend died, I decided that God isn't there for me, so I'm quitting church.
So, yep, that's a choice. We can skip church, that's fine. No consequences, but God actually had his future wife at church that he didn't go to. Sorry, Grayson. All right, go for it, Katie. You can go over instead of under. I'm feeling nice today. All right, so Katie's very shy, but even though she is shy, God called her to encourage guests, volunteer at church events, dress up like aliens for the children's ministry, whatever. So for her, she did end up making a lot of new friends because of that. Go ahead, last one. This is a doozy, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I didn't want to hear the holy lectures from my mom. I just quit answering her calls. I was dying and I didn't even know she was sick. At least I didn't have to deal with all the drama.
And you guys think that I'm like really overdoing this, but I'm not. I go into people's homes all the time. I'm a pediatric physical therapist. I live in people's homes. Stuff like this happens all the time. One little peek over the fence, you get caught in the riptide, and your course on life is destroyed. What Grayson did not know is that with his tremendous guilt from living on the wrong side of the fence, alienating his mom because he just didn't want to hear about it, wasn't able to help her in her death. He broke down at the funeral, but was encouraged by some of the volunteers from the church. All right, I'm leaving the chairs here just so Katie doesn't have to go through this last obstacle with everyone watching so closely. So go ahead, Katie. Katie is such a good sport. Grayson volunteered, but I told him I didn't feel like doing an extraction today. Okay, good job, Katie.
Nailed it.
Although I don't particularly like funerals, I help set up for the church for services and often have the chance to encourage people to.
So, Brian, I am not trying to set her up. So, she met a young man at the church at a funeral because she was volunteering, and she introduced him to the CR director because he was hurting. And after a couple years of going to CR, he had a successful recovery and is still in that process. And they got married and go to church together. I'm not for real. Okay. But if you notice, the way of the world is a wide road. It's easy. It's easy to get yourself into. It's the majority now. It used to not be, but it's the majority now. Worldly living is the majority. Thank you, Grayson. But if you want to live a Christian life and you want to live in God's will, it's not easy. It is more difficult. The way to heaven is a narrow path versus the way of the world. And it will be more difficult. There's times of wait. Thank you, Katie. There's times of waiting. There's times where you think, is God listening? What is he doing? I ask that all the time when I have another flare-up with my back. I have just lots of herniated disc, and there's times that I can't walk, and I say, okay, God, I've been listening for a long time. Whatever you're telling me, I'm listening. But obviously, it's in God's time. He has plans for your life, and even though if it appears to be difficult, it's for a reason. I have a purpose. I have a plan, and my purpose for you is my perfect will. Not easy, but it's my perfect will. So when you want to look at the gifts and the blessings of this earth, because there are lots. I love working with the children. It's my passion. It's been my passion since I was a child myself. I started in ministry at the age of 17 with preschoolers, so obviously I love children. But God gives you a path, and you can veer off the path like our wide road over here, and God will corral you back in, but all the blessings that you miss. So if you stray from God's will, you will miss blessings. But here's what people tell me all the time. The reason I chose this topic is because I've had people tell me before, why do you spend so much time at church? Why do you spend so much time teaching the kids? And then the mean one was, why do you waste your time teaching children? It won't make a difference. I've been told that before, and here's what I say. My life here is not my own, it belongs to God, and I'm not worried about the blessings I get here, because there's going to be plenty in heaven. I'm not worried about it, because even though I might miss a lot of blessings, I don't have my own pediatric clinic, I'm not famous, I am not rich, but I know that my blessings are being held for me. So when we're living not of this world, Matthew 5:11 through 12 tells us, here's your blessings. Blessed are you when the people make fun of you and hurt you because of me. College. You are also blessed when they tell all kinds of evil lies about you because of me. Middle schoolers and high schoolers standing for Christ. Be joyful and glad. Your reward in heaven is great. Not here. Your reward in heaven is great. Because here's another fact. You can gain a lot of stuff here. There's a whole bunch of fun stuff in this world. Whole bunch of fun stuff. You can get a ton of possessions. You can get power. You can get fame. You can have a really beautiful house. I've been in some really, really beautiful houses with some really angry, sad people. I've also been in some really run-down houses with cardboard over the windows, and the mom answers the door with a baseball bat, and she was one of the happiest people I've ever met. Because when you die, all of these things that you fight for every day, all these things that you take pride in because you own or you accomplished, is void. I've been to plenty funerals. They didn't take anything with them. The only thing they left behind is their relationships with people, the love that they had for others, and how they spent their life. You can spend your life following what you want, or you can spend your life following what God wants. Because in the end, yeah, there's a lot of temptation in this world, but if you stay on your side of the fence, you'll be holy and set apart by God, and you can live in His will. Even though it's difficult, you can. And the reason why this is so important to me is because of the kids. Yes, you need to be happy, you need to have joy. But in my life, because my passion and my calling is to work with kids, I see the effect that it has on kids. When we have Awana and 60% of our kids or more don't have any male figures in the house, that's concerning. When we have kids who don't have a mom because she was on drugs, ended up beating them up and didn't realize it, and they're torn from their home, that's because somebody, an adult, is not living in God's will. And it can really affect our children. So if my lovely two volunteers can bring my stage back, David is my other voluntold. Thank you, David. And he is going to give you a thought to leave us with. Give us just one moment. Children's ministry, we can't flow like everybody else because we have stuff. Technical difficulties, one moment, please.
Come on, son, we don't want to be late for school.
Come here, Dad, I just gotta grab my lunchbox.
Your mom remembered to pack your lunchbox, but she can't remember my coffee. Hurry up, we've got to go drive through so I can get my coffee.
All right, Dad.
Great, some old man can't back out of the parking space. Get out of the way, you stupid idiot. Yeah, I need a large coffee with sugar and creamer. Here you go, thank you. Hey, you shorted me 27 cents. Go back to kindergarten, dude.
Hey, Dad, if you make a mistake while you're counting, does it mean you gotta go back to kindergarten?
Never mind.
Excuse me, sir. Could you spare $1? I'm
you're
awfully hungry.
If you're hungry, get a job, dude.
Hey, Dad, was that man homeless?
Yeah, why?
Well, he had a Air Force hat on, and maybe he was in the military and he just needs some help.
Well, you know what? He can go get a job.
All right, well, I guess I'll go to school now, Dad.
All right, son, have a good day.
Okay, Dad.
What's wrong, son?
Dad, I had a really bad day at school.
What happened?
Promise you're not going to be mad.
Well, what happened?
Okay, here's a note from the teacher.
Okay. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Waring, today your son Rocky was sent to the principal's office. He was waiting in line at lunch and yelled at the child in front of him. Get out of the way, you stupid idiot. In math, a child answered incorrectly and Rocky told her, go back to kindergarten. During snack time, a boy didn't have a snack and asked Rocky for some food. And Rocky said, if you're hungry, have a snack. If you're hungry, tell your mom to get a job. We are a Christian school, and this type of behavior is not tolerated. What Rocky didn't know was that the boy who was moving slowly in line has cerebral palsy, and it takes him a few extra minutes to carry his tray. The girl that missed the math question was failing math last year, but now she goes to tutoring and has a C. And the boy who asked for food has a family who is struggling after his dad died in military service, and his mother is trying to care for 4 children of her own, on her own. Please talk to your son about how Christians are supposed to treat other people and reflect Jesus in everything they do. Sincerely, Miss Winters. Rocky, how could you act like that to those kids at school? It's a Christian school and they won't put up with that. Where on earth did you learn how to treat people like that?
Well, I learned it from watching you, Dad. So, if you want to live not on this world because it has an eternal impact, not just for you, But for everyone around you, you got to keep your priorities straight. And the priorities aren't me, me, me. The priorities are living in God's will. So we want to serve God with whatever talent He gave you. It could be carpentry. It could be accounting. It could be teaching kids. But serve God with whatever talent He gave you. But most importantly, try to accomplish His perfect will. And that's nothing that we control. It's just by giving full surrender. Because we don't belong to ourselves. We don't belong to this world. We were bought by God through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, our Savior. We belong to Him. So if we belong to God, we want to stay on our side of the fence. Thank you.